the environmental aspect of LEF and the focus on the mission and the idea that we could confront these truths about climate change and energy consumption and all that. And instead of just grimacing and turning away from it, that we could actually do things in our lives that stood a chance, perhaps remote chance, but a chance of making the world better and somehow slightly softening the landing, as we really run up against catastrophic destruction, that we're wreaking on the planet. I want to do something that feels like I'm supporting a project that could be transformational. And I just thought that the way folks at LEF looked at the problems and grappled with them and said, yeah, there's other things that might work, but there's time-tested technologies and things, ways of living that we can do today. Why wait? And just to add a point about the money, so far, by growing so much of our own food, having the energy systems that we have so that we don't pay energy bills, and just living in a simple way, the expenses are really low. So a lot of the money that I've contributed is really just sitting there, kind of waiting for a purpose. And that purpose has been in the past to help with the outreach work. I'm John Milner, and we're here at Living Energy Farm in Louisa, Virginia.
Where did you grow up, and how were you raised?
Sure. I grew up mostly in a town in suburban D.C. called Olney, Maryland, which I think historically was an intersection of two roads that then kind of sprawled out from there. I grew up there. My parents split up, and my mom and I ended up moving in with my grandparents, which I think was honestly really fun and probably a formative experience that got me to enjoy kind of living with a group of people beyond just. I was an only child, so it was just been me and my parents. And I don't know, I had two uncles, and they would come to visit and stay with my grandparents and stuff, and I always thought that was really fun. And eventually, my mom remarried, and we moved into our own place, the three of us, and that was really great too, and a wonderful stepfather. So I did that. I went to a Montessori school, which I thought I reflect very fondly on that. I was also a little kid, so it's easier to have rosy memories of that. But it was very cool. Really loved the emphasis on curiosity, and there were rules, but the rules kind of felt like they made sense and weren't just being dictated from some arbitrary authority necessarily. Then from there, I went to a all-male Catholic school, which was quite different.
Okay.
But still, nevertheless, felt less intimidating than other schools that I visited. There did feel like there was a community there. There might have been a lot of weird kind of other baggage and stuff going on. But I did at least get the sense, maybe just because it was a small school, that there were people who cared about each other there. So I liked that.
So you were at a private Catholic elementary?
No, that started for me in 7th grade.
Okay.
I left the Montessori school sort of 1 year after, I guess, most kids would move from elementary school to middle school. And I ended up there in 7th grade and stayed till 12th grade. Yeah.
And what did you do after high school?
I wanted to go somewhere different. And so whenever I was applying I knew I wanted to go to college. I guess it just felt like that was kind of expected. And I did just enjoy learning for the sake of learning. I didn't really know what I wanted to do after that, but I went to Fordham University in the Bronx, and that almost felt like sort of a minimum amount of distance I wanted to put between myself and I don't know, I wanted some independence, I wanted something new. So I did that and got put into a dorm room that was meant for 2 people, but they had 3 of us in there. And I loved it. Like, it was so much fun. And we were on this hallway that people would have to walk by to get to their rooms, to like a wing of the building. We just like leave the door open and people would come in and say hi, hang out or whatever. So it felt like, I don't know, it just sort of felt like this thing that I had been missing. Like I lived with these people in that small room and our personalities like got along well. And then also there were these other people who would come by and hang out. And I just really enjoyed that experience.
You're the hangout room in the hallway.
Yeah.
Right.
And there was this weird sort of like silly fight the power dynamic too, because the dorm was kind of a goody two-shoes dorm, which was cool because we had like a bathroom in the room, which was like unheard of for a freshman dorm. But they had a lot of rules. There's some interesting characters there enforcing the rules. And so I think in some ways it almost was a unifying thing to just sort of feel like, oh yeah, we're going against the man on this, even if the man was like someone 2 years older than us, just trying to like do their job so they could get their scholarship work study thing or whatever.
Right.
But there was a playful element to it. That was fun.
Would you describe from the Montessori experience through college kind of an increasing level of arbitrary authority? Or
Yeah.
Is that the trend?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
that was very much the case, and like something that was kind of like hard to grapple with. Yeah. Just sort of feeling like being in like total like fear of the arbitrary authority and the arbitrary, or what felt arbitrary to me, like sort of social norms about what was cool and how you should dress and things. In that all-male Catholic school, which was still such a small little isolated place, but compared to the Montessori school, felt like, okay, this is more the mainstream and you have to act certain ways and say certain things and not get too excited about this or that. To get it, doing that for 5 years, at the end of it, I was just sort of like tired and didn't care and just wanted to do something else. And then I guess in college, yeah, like meeting people learning things politically and meeting people who like, maybe had more radical ideas than I had, and recognizing that there was more authority, even maybe a different authority. You're living with your parents, there's an authority there, but like this arbitrary authority, maybe more of it, but also getting to hear like other voices and stuff. Calling it out for what it is, or talking about other ways of doing things, and then whatever the silly manifestations of us just trying to get away with whatever we could under the eyes of the man.
Did you go through a process of radicalization in college, or were things that you already kind of suspected about the world made more apparent? What kind of routes did that experience send you down?
Right. Yeah, I think it made, there was to some extent things that I'd already thought about, but hadn't maybe seen as much. I think like in New York City, I saw some levels of like segregation and inequality and things that I wasn't used to seeing like right up close, because like going to the Montessori school, like it felt very diverse, but these were like often, children of like diplomats or whatever, like people, there were a variety of like income levels and stuff, but it was still like, these are people who are like doing pretty well, they may be like racially diverse, but they're economically probably not so. The Catholic school was less diverse, and you could tell that just by virtue of the neighborhood in Northeast DC. Like the people inside that school didn't really look like the neighborhood, but nevertheless, like there wasn't a lot of strife or something that I could detect. Going to the Bronx, I mean, certainly immediately there was this obvious divide between the residential students who were like living in the dorms and the commuters, and they, it was clear that the university was kind of, catering a little bit more to the needs of the residential students who are often, more white, more affluent. And I took a class where there was a project. I think there were a few classes I took where they gave you some options to like do different projects. And I think one of these classes was, what's it called? American Pluralism. And you could go to the Lower East Side Tenement Museum as an option, and then like write a paper about that. And so going to that and seeing like, okay, that was like talking about history and the just like, the amount of people that were crammed in like a tiny tenement that was a living space, like a working space for like manufacture of like textile goods and stuff, and like just that, and then also seeing like what's still there, inequality wise, I think was left an impression on me. And then I had another course, I think it was actually like a religion class, but there was an option of doing a community service project and writing about that instead of just doing a research paper. So I did, and I went to work at a high school in East Harlem, just kind of like tutoring kids and handing out laptops, just to help out whatever I could do. And that was interesting too, because that was an experience of like, it was a private school. It was a private school exclusively for like low-income families, and the goal was to try and find a way to make that affordable or accessible. And of course, like maybe there was one white kid in the whole student body, but the staff was, I would guess, predominantly white. But yeah, like seeing that, just seeing the inequality, and also seeing, in some ways, there was this glorification of corporate America, because I think there was the idea that like, there wasn't a lot of questioning of the larger system by this model of school, which is called Cristo Rey, as started in Chicago by a Jesuit guy. There was this idea like, we're lifting people out of poverty, or we're providing access to education that they wouldn't otherwise get. And I thought that was really cool, and I enjoyed working with the kids, and it just seemed worthwhile to like help people however I could. But at the same time, it was like, okay, we're sending kids to like work one day a week in a glass tower in like, the financial district in Manhattan or something. And these are people, sometimes whose like parents might have listed on their income that they collect like aluminum cans and deposit them for the money as like their primary source of income. So it was definitely put that into contrast, like seeing that and feeling like I was there doing something that was probably good, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't transformative. It wasn't something that, as much as I enjoyed like working with the students and the teachers, that it wasn't like something I could spend my whole life doing, because it didn't feel like the model would be able to expand, or that it was really sort of getting at the roots of the problem that made that have to exist in the first place. Like I just felt like, at the end of the day, you shouldn't have to have a special school that can take maybe 400 kids max of like from all of New York City and try to offer this like pipeline to a better life. That there needed to be something, like they could keep doing that, and I hope it succeeds, but like there needed to be something more than that.
It felt like a palliative of rich liberals, perhaps.
Yeah.
About being able to fund, I'm sure a lot of benefactors feel good about.
Right, and
not to say it's a poor program.
And we exploited that to the max. We would get rich people liquored up, and they would come to the like fundraising gala, and these dudes would be like, these finance dudes would be like bidding against each other in an auction for a thing that like neither one of them wanted, just to like, you know, this machismo thing. And so yeah, there were people who were at that school who were like very earnest, you know, just like service oriented people, you know, who would look at, I don't know, like maybe like a Dorothy Day or sort of like that type of like religious service, very, very dedicated to it and saw it as like their vocation. But the reality of it was that, yeah, we still had to like operate in this capitalist system, and there was a lot of, yeah, I mean, the guy who was running the corporate work study program, which is the motto of school, this idea that like kids would go and they would work one day a week in some office job or something, and some of the jobs were cool, like they would work at like a museum or something, but a lot of it was like delivering mail in an office or something. And they would do that, and that money would help pay to run the school, like in a big way. And the guy who was like doing the recruitment, like trying to find the job placements and stuff for that, said he went into it thinking he was, I mean, it's like a sales job basically, like he was like selling this like service to these companies, and that very quickly it was like, no, this is charity. Like these are people who are doing this because they want to feel good about what they're doing. Like they're doing something that, you know, I would argue, it sounds very judgmental, but like I would argue is not necessarily good for the world, you know, like really full throttle finance capitalism is not something that's good for the world, especially in like the moment that we find ourselves with like ecological crisis and stuff. But this was giving them a way that they could feel like, I'm doing something. And so I can, you know, I'm not such a purist that I can, you know, that I would say like, okay, don't do that or abandon it because it's not perfect. But I worked there for like 3 years or something, and just thought, well, I got to try to find something more for myself. And I moved to Baltimore without much of a plan, but I had family. I never lived there myself, but I had family there.
You were involved in that program for a year or two, or?
The high school?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was involved in that for 3 years as a full-time employee.
Oh, after college?
After college.
Okay. You moved to Baltimore.
Yeah, so I was like visiting family in Baltimore, and I liked it. And I was tired of the thing I was doing in New York, and so I decided to kind of move without a huge plan of what I was going to do. But I knew I wanted to live with people, and I kind of just met some people on the street, and ended up, one thing led to another. This was before I had moved. I didn't just like take a plunge with absolutely nothing, but I just like met some people and ended up kind of crashing at their apartment, just like almost just like in a hallway. But it was, I don't know, it was cool. And also in New York, I should add, like I was always living with people. Like I guess I have not actually lived alone at any point in my life. And usually with like 3 other people. It was at one time was as low as 1. But so we moved to Baltimore. It was fun, but I was like there as a temporary guest in these people's apartment, and so I started looking for places to, you know, make a more permanent abode. And I think at some point I remembered like Twin Oaks, and I'd always been interested in communes, and I think I first learned about Twin Oaks because when I was growing up we had a hammock that my mom was like, you know where this hammock came from? This came from a commune, and like whatever. And so I think I was just thinking like I want something more than, you know, just like a roommate agreement. I want like, you know, people to live with each other, care about each other, and maybe like share resources or whatever. And I started looking into just whatever I could find in Baltimore, and there's a pretty cool place called Red Clover. That's actually like a collectively owned house, or maybe it's 2 houses now. And I don't know that it's fully income sharing, but like they own those properties, and it's like a consensus-based thing. And it felt almost like intimidating, like it was a little bit too serious. Like maybe, yeah, I wasn't ready to do all that. And you'd be like assigned to cook dinners for the community, you know, and things like that.
What aspects seemed too intense, or people were very serious, or the structure was very rigid?
I didn't get as far as like even talking to them. I was just reading. I was like reading stuff on the internet, and yeah, it just felt like I'd never lived in something. I'd always just lived in like, you know, we're paying a landlord rent or whatever, or I'm paying somebody else who's paying the landlord. We're taking our cash to a bar and giving it. And I think it was, yeah, I was just worried that, wow, can I even cook for this large number of people? Like I can cook for myself and for a couple other people. And it wasn't even that large. I don't know what it was, probably less than 10 people. But yeah, there were certain like expectations, and there was sort of like a trial. I think you had to go, and that was a way that we could get in, was by cooking the community a meal. Like you would just show up and you would do that, and then I guess like talk to them, and they would interview you or something. And I was just like, I don't know, it sounds kind of scary.
That's fairly informal though.
Yeah, it is pretty informal.
Okay.
Yeah, I wanted that. I had that. Oh, this is a cool model. Like everybody owns it, and everyone participates in the maintenance, and there's no landlord or whatever. That sounds great, but for some reason, yeah, I think I was just a little doubting myself, and it did seem like it was a commitment too. That might have been what it was. That it was not. If I was going to do something like that, it wasn't something I should just like waltz into and leave casually. So, but I did find another place in Baltimore that billed itself as a community house with 6 people total. And I kind of had to like go after them on Craigslist. Because I sent them a thing and they never responded to me, and then they like reposted the ad, and I sent them like a meme or something. I was like, hey, why didn't you tell me you didn't want me if you're gonna just repost it? And I was like, they might think this is weird or too forward, but hopefully they'll laugh at least. And so they thought they liked it, and they were like, oh yeah, you should come over and like we'll talk to you, whatever. So I went over, and there was another person who they had come at the same time, and I think like both of us were interviewing for the same room, which was a little bit awkward, but we both wished each other good luck at the end. But it was like they did these potlucks every other week. They had a big potluck, and they had like at least like, you know, like a house meeting or something on the off weeks where there wasn't a potluck, and there was some sharing and some cooking together, and just like it had like a pretty warm vibe to it. You know, the house like a bit run down and stuff, but like it felt right, and so I got into it. There ended up being I think 2 rooms that opened up, so it ended up, I think it wasn't a competition at the end, but I did that.
How long were you there?
I feel like that was another 3 or so years. The landlord kicked us out because she said she wanted to sell the place, which I don't think she ever did. But I wanted to buy it from her. I was like trying to get people together, and it needed a lot of work, and I was like hoping we could work something out. After that, it was the year the Freddie Gray murder happened, and I remember because there was a curfew in Baltimore, and we were trying to move our stuff. We were just moving like a block away. We found this other house to rent. I just remember like scurrying around, like moving stuff after the curfew, and we were not supposed to be outside. And yeah, all that was going on, like to some of the protests around that, and yeah, so I moved in to that place, which was almost everyone from the previous house, and And it did feel that for a moment, I was like, oh, this is like, we're getting more serious now. Like, this place is you know, we're going to maintain it better. We found somebody who's going to do like a work trade and teach us formal consensus. Like, we're going to like, at the old house, there was a dude who had been there the longest. And like, he had a strong personality and just kind of like had just authority from having been around. And people would circulate through the house because they didn't agree with him on stuff, and instead of challenging it, they would just leave.
Yeah.
And so we broke up with that dude.
So he did not go with
He did not go. It fell to me to tell him that we were breaking up with him, which was fair because I'd been there the next longest after him and sort of had, you know, the most relationship with him. But it was a little bit tough because I know he was hurt by it. But yeah, we had lost good people, you know, who just didn't want to deal with his issues. And so, yeah, so we went to this other thing. And I think, though, I was still kind of like bitter about getting like evicted from my house. You know, it was like I didn't really like that new house better. There were just things, and I was just like, this kind of stinks. Like, I want to collectively own a house and not deal with this landlord stuff. And it kind of started looking at things and talking to people about doing that. It wasn't getting a lot of traction. I also wasn't like probably trying as hard as I could have, but
So even among the people you were living with,
even among the people
they
I was
didn't
living
have
with,
a strong interest.
right? Because there was one guy who I think was like still like philosophically opposed to work in just about every form, and was like super interesting and fun to talk to, but you know, definitely not really interested and certainly not working for money, but even other forms of work, I don't think was terribly interested to him. And then other people just really had like their own priorities, like someone who's like starting their own nonprofit, someone who was like going to go to grad school, someone who was like, you know, starting a doula business or something, and just like lots of people were like kind of maxed out, like working their day jobs or whatever, and then also doing these passion projects or activist stuff or whatever on the side. So just like, it was like, all right, this isn't really going to happen. But my partner was interested. Like, she was having kind of an issue. Her landlord had passed away and his brother had taken over, and it was kind of not great. So she was interested in, like, I was trying to buy a house, and I was like, I'm interested in this too, but like, I want to get like a house that like I can move all these people into and keep my community, quote unquote. And so we did. But then my partner and I were the landlords.
Okay.
And I think that was not a great move. She'd also never lived in a shared housing situation like that before. I think there was a lot of tension, unclear boundaries over like, you know, which things were which people's responsibility, and you know, okay, well we're going to take care of this major issue at the house and we're going to pay for it, but we're also going to like decide how to do it because we're taking care of it, and versus, you know, like kind of being clearer, I guess, with people about, you know, we tried to share as much power with the group as possible, but ran up against the limits of what people wanted to be involved in, and not having a good understanding of that. I really thought, so we were learning consensus, right? It was like values-based decision making, and everything comes back to these values, and you have to like share the values. And we were having these conversations before we moved into the house that my partner and I bought. And I really expected the group to split in half because I sort of thought that there were two kind of centers of values. And it didn't happen. And it was funny to me because it was like people wanted, even with the disagreements we had, people wanted to stick together. And even then, like, moving is just such a pain. And like, I guess kind of sounded like the devil you know or something. Like once you're in a place, you know the people, you kind of like know their foibles and how to work with them. Yeah, it was just like people were very reluctant, myself included, to like split that group.
What would a split have looked like? A group leaving?
Well, I think like in hindsight, a lot of us felt like we should have retained that house that we were renting. Like, yeah, they were jacking up the rent and stuff, but what we could have done is like people could have stayed there and brought in new folks, and that could have been one sort of like pod, and this new house could have been a different one. And then we would have had two communities that maybe would have each been as large as the one, and maybe people would have had kind of more of shared affinity or something. But
and your partner did not live in that rented house, right?
yeah, she didn't live there before.
But you both together purchased a property,
Right.
And then all the people
And then-
from that house moved in
Yeah.
with you and your
Right.
partner who had never
Yes.
lived in.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Yeah.
And you talk about this difference of values, and people not really, they have their own lives, their own passions, their
Right.
own hobbies, so they
Yeah.
weren't necessarily all in on a cooperative living effort in the same way you envisioned it.
Well, I think it's more kind of, I think cooperative living, yes, but it was more sort of like the nuts and bolts of like the maintenance and things on the house. And even things like people were so busy that we would have meetings, and people would show up to meetings because they felt like this is mandatory, like I got to show up to a meeting. But then we were like, all right, all these meetings are either sort of like kind of neutral or negative. Why don't we do something fun together so we like each other more? And that, I don't think we ever had one of those events where everybody showed up, just because people were busy and they didn't view that with the same level of like, I've got to carve out time in my schedule with work, or like the social relationships I maintain at work or whatever, to go and like do some frivolous thing with the people I live with. And I'm certainly not trying to put the blame on people that I lived with. Like, they were all doing the best they could. My partner and I were, we had our own agenda. I think we insufficiently, we probably insufficiently shared authority over certain things that we very well could have, that would have made people feel more invested in the project. But the reason was just she and I buying the place is that people were not at a place in their lives where they really wanted to buy property or like embark on that with a bunch of other people.
You're all in your late 20s.
Yeah.
Most people are in their late 20s in this case.
Yeah.
So how did that end?
So that ended with, the house is still there. I'm still on the mortgage and the title and all that stuff with my partner.
And your partner lives there?
And she still lives there. And we've been able to like just rent to our friends. She has a band and is very into like the music scene there, and just knows people as a big social circle. And for the most part, like we've just been able to like rent to people we have good relationships with already, and that's been fine. But it's not a community. Like for a moment we had kind of like an expense sharing thing going around like food and stuff, and we had people come in and they were like, yeah, I kind of just like, I just want my own shelf with my own stuff. And I was like, oh, I'm not gonna say no, because you're like a nice person and you get along with my partner and everything, and like, yeah, please like come live here. But I sort of took it as a signal, as like the type of thing that I would like to have is not going to happen here. And I think it also the experience of seeing how just having a job, like not just the hours of the job itself, but the hours that you spend like socializing with your coworkers and doing all those things, like seeing how much that tied people up really made me think again about like the intentional communities here and like the Twin Oaks model, and the idea that like
that you had only heard of or read about.
I had heard, and at this point I guess maybe I'm going to the communities conference. At some point I started going to that
you went
every
to the Twin
year.
Oaks Communities Conference.
Yeah, but I definitely never done any kind of like visit there or applied to live there.
So when did you move from Baltimore?
I came here directly.
And that was
2021 like end of October.
end of October.
Yeah.
2021.
Yeah.
And you settled on LEF based on experiences you had at the community conferences?
Well, that's how I found out about it. I knew about Twin Oaks. I was like very attracted to the income sharing model and the idea that you're sort of like working together on stuff. You can do like a variety of jobs and all that stuff seemed really nice. But I visited LEF and I heard Alexis spiel on the tour and bought a copy of his book, and the environmental aspect of LEF and the focus on the mission and the idea that we could like confront these truths about climate change and energy consumption and all that, and instead of just grimacing and turning away from it, that we could actually do things in our lives that stood a chance, perhaps remote chance, but a chance of making the world better and somehow slightly softening the landing, as we really run up against catastrophic destruction that we're wreaking on the planet.
When you say remote chance,
yeah,
a remote chance at maintaining a decent life for humans living, or a remote chance of avoiding human extinction in the next couple of centuries, or how do you view all that?
I don't know. I mean, it's hard to. I mean, there's so many ways we could go. With all the nukes and everything. Just so much ways that we're like, just there's like that.
Capable of collective mass destruction.
Yeah. And so I guess my feeling is like, I don't know what's going to happen in the next few hundred years. I would imagine that people will be around, that we won't go extinct. But it seems like we're in for like a really hard landing, that like a lot of people are going to like suffer and die if we don't reduce our consumption and change the way that we live, basically immediately. Should have been done in the past. But and I think convincing, we're living in a country that consumes huge amounts of energy per capita. There are other places in the world that don't. If we could live like they do, there wouldn't be an issue. But so that's where I think the remoteness of the chance feels like it comes in, because it feels very difficult to convince people accustomed to high consumption lifestyle, even if they're reading the news and stuff, even if they believe it, which some people don't, to like radically change the way that they're living if like their peers aren't doing it, or I don't know, until they're forced to do it by something, because it's just it involves some work and some adjustment. I don't think it's like a great hardship the way we live here or something, but it is different,
Right. People who grew up in a certain way are would see some of things here and be freaked out very quickly.
Yeah, right.
Aside from that, having a fighting chance and wanting to do things that aren't just wallowing in despair, etc.
Right.
What have you found about living here that you enjoy? The pace of life and living a lower energy consumption lifestyle, a much more conscientious energy lifestyle.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a little weird in terms of my membership, because I have a job where I work as a software developer for like a humanitarian data collection tool. So something that again feels somewhat like the high school work, where it's like it's not making the world a worse place, I hope, but it's also not the kind of like transformative project that I would like. So that's what I'm doing as a full-time job. So I'm spending kind of a lot of time in front of the computer still, and then helping out by like fixing things around here and, harvest or whatever as best I can, doing the dishes or something. So I see, at least, it feels good, even if I'm not totally integrated into it. It feels really good to be in something that feels like a community where people every day are working together. They're not having to commute or go off to, away from everyone else just because they need to earn a wage. Like, people are here working the land. It was very gratifying. I mean, that when I first came, like in October or whatever, 2021, it seemed like a convenient weekend. I didn't think about like, this is harvest time. So I got to like sit on a bucket in the field and pick peanuts and have conversations with people and dig sweet potatoes out of the ground and stuff. And then we ate that stuff. And that was a totally new experience for me, actually pulling a field crop out of the earth. I mean, I'd done like some gardening a little bit or whatever, or I lived with people who did, but pulling like field crops or like staple crops out of the earth and processing them here using, like solar powered stuff, and then eating that, cooking it with solar powered stuff. That felt really, really good. Yeah.
That's the juice.
Yeah.
That's the grow your own juice right there.
Yeah.
It's a good feeling.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
You took an LEF tour, you got the book, you read the book, and you went back home to Baltimore for some amount of time, and then you came to live here.
I stewed about it. I think I found out about this place. I don't know if it was taking the tour or if it was a friend of mine who came and took the tour. Phil, who you met Phil at the dance party.
Last
Right?
night.
Yeah. So I think Phil came here first, because I think Phil went to the communities conference before I did, and like maybe forwarded me a newsletter or something. So that was in 2017. So I was thinking about this place certainly from 2018, like after coming myself and seeing it and getting the book, like thinking about this place pretty much every time I would read a headline about climate change or something, which is basically like every day, and just thinking about like, yeah, like shouldn't I go here? Shouldn't I go to that place and try to help in some way? I mean, I had this other thought that like, maybe because the chance is so remote that we'll be able to like sort of push the rudder or make an impact globally to try to like really help lots and lots of people, that maybe I should go like sweep the floor at like a nuclear fusion research facility or some kind of like moonshot thing, which may also fail, but like if it succeeds would get us to like a Star Trek, like post-scarcity economy or something that wouldn't require all these people in the developed world through like force of will to like change what they're doing for the sake of avoiding catastrophe or mitigating it. I guess it's already happening. So I sort of felt like, I mean, what I was doing day to day was just the same old, just doing my job and trying to manage that and helping out, with my family, which is a big part of my life. My grandparents, who I grew up with, lived like 3 blocks away from that house in Baltimore, and my uncles like a block away or something. So that, there was a lot of, and obviously my partner, there was a lot of pull to just like sort of stay put, but I was feeling like I want to do something, even if it's like pretty mundane thing. I want to do like something that feels like I'm supporting a project that could be transformational. And I just thought that the way folks at LEF looked at the problems and grappled with them and said, yeah, there's other things that might work, but like there's time-tested technologies and things, ways of living that we can do today. Why wait? I think that was that, and the mission. Like I sometimes feel like the other communities in the area, like they're bigger, they've got a lot more stuff going on, and that a lot of their energy is invested in like keeping that going, which is worthwhile because those places are inspirational to huge numbers of people, and those places are part of why this exists. but the focus on, we're not just here building this one community, but we're trying to like have a global reach. That was a big motivator. Yeah, to choose this place as a community to join.
Okay, so you're already very accustomed to sharing space with other people.
Yeah.
So that wasn't, even though this was your first.
This is a for sure, like,
community.
yeah, income sharing community for sure.
Yeah.
First community that really, like sort of steeped in the traditions of Twin Oaks or whatever. Yeah, like first really, where like it wasn't trying to graft intentionality onto it after the fact. Like this is an intentional community. I'm just joining as like a dude. Like I'm not a leader of this or something. Like I'm here because I think it's already going and I want to be a part of it and support it. That's new, was my first experience doing that.
And it's income sharing, but you're also working remotely and paying a mortgage.
Right.
So maybe go into a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I guess that maybe wouldn't fly at a stricter place, but right. So when I approached people here, I was like, well, I have these obligations to take care of, and so it's basically limiting the amount of income that I share to like 70%. So it's not 100, and it's not. And I discussed with them another option might be like, well, I could put 100% into the collective pot, and then take some back.
That you get to pay your mortgage.
Right. Yeah. And that honestly would feel pretty good, but I think there might be like tax issues for that for the community, because if I'm suddenly throwing a bunch of money in the common pot and making it falsely look to the government like all the folks here are like doing some lucrative job, and then they lose Medicaid or something because of that. That's
because there are only 4 full members in the income sharing scheme.
Yeah.
So if you're comfortable saying so, that 70% that you're giving, what percentage of that is the community's income?
Oh, like what does it make up? I don't know the answer. I mean, it's variable, and I think this is fine to say. I don't think anyone would object to me saying, but like the like the seeds business and the sweet potato business that we used to run, I think could each pull in like $30,000 or something. And yeah, I mean, there's been an issue with the sweet potatoes business, which is a longer story, but
the bunnies are eating all the sweet potatoes.
That's an issue too. The bunnies are eating sweet potatoes. But yeah, I mean, it was sort of like I could very easily say like it doesn't matter if we do that business. I can cover that, no problem. And I mean, there is a problem. The problem is that it's just me. It depends on me, and it's not a community business that other people can plug into.
Right.
Yeah.
I pointed out because obviously LEF existed for 10 years before I got here.
Yeah.
And there is a founding family that has been here, and this is their home.
Yeah.
Other communities, Compersia is an example in D.C. You have a couple or a single person who has a high income. They may have some kids. They want some people to live with, help them take care of their kids. But they're the dominant income.
Yeah.
When they pull the rug's pulled up and the community's gone.
Right.
This is a little different because it's an
Yeah.
established community. You've come in 10 years in.
Yes.
They're not going to put themselves in a position where they're beholden to a single member.
Yeah, they're justifiably wary of that, right? I think for the the examples that you listed is that like this shouldn't be a sustaining source of income.
Yeah, in terms of like the number of full members, it has never been particularly high, right? I don't think it's ever been.
I don't think so.
Here.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Do you want to see a growing community in that respect? Or do you think communicating the vision here and the ideas here, is that the priority for you?
Yeah, I guess You'll get different answers to this when you ask different people for sure, but I don't see it so much as like mutually exclusive. Um, I I I haven't been here for the 10 plus years, trying to manage a rotating cast of like volunteers and people coming in and living and staying short term. So I don't know what that's like, and I can understand that it's challenging. But I would like to see more people here, not necessarily a new Twin Oaks or something, but I think the carrying capacity feels a bit low for having a continuity of a core group that can keep things going when there's turnover, keep the knowledge passed from one person to the next, have the labor available for everything that needs to be done. And just to add a point about the money, like so far, I mean, by growing so much of our own food, having the energy systems that we have so that we don't pay energy bills, and just living in a simple way, the expenses are like really low. So a lot of like the money that I've contributed is really just sitting there, kind of like waiting for a purpose. And that purpose has been in the past, like to help with the outreach work or like buy materials for building cookers or something like that. So almost none of my earnings have gone for like day-to-day expenses of maintaining the property or like feeding people. So I think
mainly because those costs are so low.
Right. Yeah. And because of the other income streams from farming and like Debbie and Alexis have some personal income streams. Brenda has Social Security. So yeah. It's to me it's more. It's not so much about it's more about knowledge, labor, avoiding burnout of the founders. And they've stated explicitly that they want to do more of the outreach work and less of, like community management type of things and farm management, and, trying to tell people what to do and find places for them when folks show up and maybe don't have skills already coming into it. So that has opened opportunity for, I think of like Brenda as the kind of next in line in leadership by seniority and by virtue of living at Twin Oaks for 30 years and being the person who is very committed. I think Brenda would stay here forever as long as her needs are being met. If she, I'm still like, well, I don't know, I like this place a lot and I want to continue supporting it, but do I want to try and start something inspired by this that's in or near Baltimore, closer to my family, or, I don't know. But I think, Brenda's very committed to that. So I would like to, sorry, the long answer to your question, I would like to see more housing here and just a slightly bigger community. I imagine there's like this is total, just conjecture. I imagine there's like a sweet spot between like a big community with big community problems and a community that's this size where it feels like a lot's on the shoulders of the founders, frankly, and anyone else who happens to stick around for a couple of years or something.
Why do you think it has been so difficult to get, particularly young people, 20s, 30s, 40s, to stay here for the long term?
Yeah, gosh, that's a question I grapple with. I mean, I wish I had been around earlier in the history of LEF to see what was going on then. At this point, it's it's an organization that pretty well has its direction and priorities, and I think that while the founders are very much receptive to feedback and want to get the consent of the group when they're doing things, they've got their ideas about how things are going to get done, and they don't want to waste a lot of time. They were wanting to respond to the emergency that we're facing and do it in the ways that they view are efficient. I do think that at times that I hate to use like the corporate lingo, but it feels like there's like sort of like a startup mentality and kind of like a move fast, and people just doing so many projects simultaneously, and it doesn't necessarily leave a lot of time available to write a lot of documentation or keep a bunch of policies that are really up to date that you can go and refer to if you have a question about why something is being done the way it is, or even necessarily train people on how to do things.
What comes to mind?
Well, I think
like as simple as how the kitchen works, like how you should operate in the kitchen.
Could be. I mean, I'll tell you one thing. So, like, Debbie and Alexis went to Puerto Rico for 2 months and came back in like a few weeks ago, and that gave me the opportunity to work on projects here that I wouldn't have been able to do then, simply because Alexis could do them a lot faster and better than I could, and would have done it if he were here. Because he would have wanted to do them quickly and not wait for me, who trying to juggle a full-time job and do this stuff. So the examples are like the biogas digester, like rats chewed into the pipes on 2 separate occasions. One depressurized the gas storage. The other was like there's a thermal loop. And Alexis, like, that's a big priority of his is biogas and the potential that we could run small tractors off of biogas and get the farm away from fossil fuels entirely. So I have no doubt, and this is nothing against him, that he would have like done that as A1 priority, like fixing that stuff. And I did it as a priority too. Like, I fixed the gas line, but the thermal loop, it took me, I don't know, at least a couple weeks between, like digging out the straw and talking to him on the phone about what I needed to do and going to get the parts from Charlottesville, and he would have done it faster. So by him being away, it gave me the opportunity to do it in like a slower way while juggling the full-time job and get it done and have the satisfaction of doing it and learn by doing. I can learn from reading things Alexis has written or talking, but there's no substitute for learning by doing. And I think that's just slower. Like, if you're not someone like Debbie and Alexis who has the level of experience either with agricultural things, mechanical things, electrical things, like, it's going to be slower to have somebody else do it. And I come in with some knowledge of that just from having to maintain my own house or working with my grandfather or whatever on stuff. Like, I have some knowledge of that. I'm not the slowest person, but I'm certainly not as fast as they are. And so I think there's a tension there where it's like, we're trying to change the world and get stuff done fast. Like, what's the incentive to let somebody else do it who's going to be slow or possibly do it wrong? And then they would have to go back and clean it up anyway.
And what kind of meetings do you have? What kind of decisions are made? What is talked about in meetings when they happen?
Yeah. There's a lot up in the air, I would say. The general meetings are fine. We at the time had a Friday afternoon kind of check-in about how things are going and priorities, and if there were decisions about making a big purchase, buying a bunch of refrigerators or something like that, that those things would come up. In the past 2 months or so, while Debbie and Alexis were in Puerto Rico, we changed things a little bit. A lot of those big decisions that were related to the outreach work, like, buy a bunch of fridges or something, batteries, were already made and, covering the period of that trip. So we didn't have as many hugely consequential things to talk about. But we went to we were looking at sort of other communities like Cambia or Little Flower Catholic Worker House, just kind of like, what do they do? And it was sort of like, well, we get together at the beginning of the day and just kind of talk about what we're doing. And we had someone staying here who was having some real mental health troubles and trouble like eating regularly and stuff. And we thought, wow, let's all get together, like at 8:30 in the morning or something, and have breakfast or tea if you don't want to eat something, and talk. And that sort of came to substitute for the, at least for a time, for that Friday meeting. But there are also more serious meetings, like of the core members, and we just had one, really talking about what the future of this place looks like. Does it make sense to continue doing income sharing as opposed to like an expense sharing model? Because the founders don't want to manage a community business here any longer because they want to do the outreach work, and they're getting traction doing that, and it is important.
So the outreach work can be done with battery sets that are not manufactured here.
Well, right. So there is in some way, like
or
community.
Someone else would manage the manufacture here.
Yeah, well, I think they would be okay with that. It's just that hasn't been the income-producing community business. Like making the battery kits or the cookers and things like that has been a component of the outreach work. What's brought in money here has been people's outside work contributions and the seeds and sweet potato businesses.
The outreach is independently funded, pretty much, fundraising and...
Well, that's another question. Is it or isn't it? To some extent, yes. Like, there are donors and people who give money to that, grants and things. But there's an open question about, I think we all agreed, every core member, that LEF, the community, should provide like seed money to, like there's going to be like a future entity that does that outreach work and probably has like folks from Puerto Rico on the board and stuff. And that in light of everything that the founders have done, to build all of this and stuff, there should be some kind of support given by the community to them and their capacity of leaders of this, as leaders of this new organization. And also because that work is intrinsically linked with the mission of the community too. But as to like what extent the support, how that would manifest in the future, it's very much still an open question, and we're trying to figure it out. Yeah.
Do you want to talk about like day to day here, like? How do you take your days? You are working a full time,
right?
40 an hour on-call type job, or?
Yeah, it's flexible. I think that's sort of what makes it work, is that, maybe some weeks I work 20 hours a week and some I work 40 or 50 or something. So it's mostly one of those types of jobs that as long as the work is getting done, the schedule can be pretty flexible. I am on call to fix like servers and things when they break. That's fun. But
which you do remotely.
I do remotely. Yeah, we do it from here. It's only a mile from town, so there's good cell phone reception. So that's where the internet's coming from. And the energy issue is not. I have batteries that are like just for me to do this remote job, and they're running off of 250 watts of solar PV. But yeah, my laptop uses like 20 watts normally. So, and like the little internet gizmo is another 10 watts or something. I've never had an energy issue. But yeah, day to day, we're doing the morning sort of meetup thing now, which is really nice. One thing I really appreciate, it probably sounds silly, but back in Baltimore, I don't know, like that kind of programming work or whatever computer work where you're talking to people and you're engrossed in some problem. It's very easy to like skip meals or like not take lunch until like 3 o'clock or something. And that I'm often late to lunch here because I'm on the phone with somebody or in the middle of something. But I'm not that late because like here, like somebody cooks a meal, like they cooked it. And I just feel like it'd be disrespectful to show up, not like super late or not show up to their meal. And the food's really good too, and it's part of the social time. So as mundane as that is, like I really appreciate the schedule and the routine of having meals with the group, and you know that we're all eating together. It's not just like at the house in Baltimore, the common meals were an exception, they weren't the norm. And here it's definitely the norm. You're eating with everyone who's on the land at that time is coming and eating together. I love that. And yeah, and then well, you know, there's like cook and clean shifts. I can usually only cook on the weekends with the work schedule, but I can clean during the week. So doing that.
What do you think of the cleanliness level?
Oh yeah, that was one of these things that when I moved to LEF, I was thinking, like, this is probably a thing that deters people from coming here, is that it's just not that clean, or like people are turned off by that. I think that was false. Like I don't. Maybe it does. Like some people are put off by it, but I think for the most part, the things that make people decide whether to stay or go are bigger issues than that. But yeah, it's different. It's one of those things where I have to think like, you know, is there a good reason to be fussier about cleanliness, or is it just like, you know, a cultural standard that we have that's kind of like a way to show status over other people or something? Because like cleaning, especially in the cosmetic sense, like I'm not worried about like, oh yeah, my food is going to be contaminated with something, but like cosmetically the place doesn't really ever look spick and span. There was a chore day that's sort of like come and gone, you know, like this sort of depends on who's around. If someone sort of takes the lead of kind of going around and saying like, these are things we should address and let's do a regular chore day on Friday. You know, we were doing that for a while, and I thought that was really fun. It was like, this is an opportunity to like put the computer away and stop doing that crap and like get out together, and everyone's, you know, like cleaning the tub and the sink and yeah, like taking down the dish rack and wiping all the surfaces and doing all that. And that stuff's really fun. I enjoy that. I think like that, to me, that all that is a component of what I would say is like sort of the proof of concept nature of a lot of things that we have at LEF. I think like there's a lot of things that they're here and they work, and you know, people are living here and they're not getting sick or anything like that. Like the energy systems are here and they work, and like the cookers and stuff, people make meals on them. But there are a lot of edges that are rough and things that could be made nicer. And I think some of those things have, you know, like real world implications. And they could be for health. It could be, you know, for usability. It makes you less likely to burn yourself pulling a pot out of the cooker or drop the lid on your foot or something. Like there are things, they're not just like trivial or cosmetic, but just that we haven't really gotten to yet.
Right.
And with the emphasis on the outreach work and just, I think when I came here, I was wondering, I really didn't know. I'd visited multiple times. I didn't know what it was going to be like to live here at all. I was almost imagining like, you know, this could be like almost like a barracks or something, you know, that this is like a, I don't want to like use like too much militaristic language, but like that this place is so mission oriented that, you know, just be ready to expect like zero niceties or something. You know, that was kind of like what I was imagining it might be like. And I wasn't sure that I was up for the challenge, really, but I was like, I got to give it a try. I think, again, COVID made me realize that like you can't always just do things whenever you want. Like there were lockdowns and stuff, and you couldn't just come and visit here or move in for a while.
Right. I think that's a really important part, though. And this is a very functional space. This is an
Right.
incredibly functional space and an amazingly efficient space. And like I appreciate the hell. I'm amazed by what is happening here. And like a lot of these refining things can be, anyway, you refine the technology to your local situation how you want to,
Yeah.
but it's here. It is
Right.
proof of concept. And you do say it's like a barracks and such, but compared to Eastman, these are nice large rooms with
Yeah.
nice windows. Compared to Twin Oaks even, these
Yeah.
are nice rooms. They are not moldy. They're very well
Yeah.
temperature regulated. I haven't been here in the summer yet, but in terms of comfort and such, it seems
Right.
like this is, in a lot of regards, this is a better, more comfortable space. Having a door directly to the outside.
Oh, I love that.
People
Yeah, it's
really,
great.
sometimes when you're living in a community and you live in a dormitory and you have to go, sometimes you don't want to go through a hallway where you might see someone else or, blah, blah,
Absolutely.
blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
or-
I mean, I think I learned very quickly, like coming here, that like, no, it's not a barracks. I mean, on the one hand, like it is a lot nicer than that, like you're saying, absolutely.
There's a piano in there, people.
Hell yeah, there's a beautiful
piano.
grand piano, and it's in tune, or was recently anyway.
Needs a little tuning.
Yeah, I mean, it needs another visit. Yeah.
That's a yearly
But
thing.
also, like, it's like this is a community. This is not like some deployment that people, go home from after so many months, or a workplace where people, at the end of the day, they leave and they sleep somewhere else. Like, this is a community, and so people have needs. Like, I think as much as in some ways, there's something romantic and like, almost feels like incumbent upon us at this age and time to like be like self-sacrificing people who like don't do the fun stuff and just attend to like fixing the problem so that future generations can like have a livable planet. As much as I would like to be able to throw myself 100% into just like work that is just and has an impact, I can't do it. I mean, maybe some people can, but like you just have to have the needs of like socializing and hanging out and feeling, comfortable in your space and emotional connection to other human beings. All those things, I think, are, people are immensely adaptable, but I think that the mission here is about, what does it say? Like demonstrating that a fulfilling life is possible without the use of fossil fuels. It's not that a mere existence is possible. It's a fulfilling life. And like, it's cool that you visited since, like JJ and Tyler here and stuff, and like they have been doing the weekly dance parties and things like that is actually like a huge change from when I first came here. And the fact that like we've got people from other communities who like regularly come and attend is very cool. And yeah, it's one night a week. I think I would like to hope that things like that rejuvenate us and give us more energy to like work on the hard problems the rest of the time, as opposed to just being like, oh, this is a loss. The time we spent doing that could have been spent changing the world. I think we need that time to recharge. Right. I mean, that's the tension, right? Because you don't want to just like fuck off all the time. You don't want to just be working all the time and burn out and have intense tunnel vision. But yeah, I mean, they're right. I think in the micro level, when we were talking earlier about how is the community run and how does it retain people, or not, there is a tension between the zeal for getting the work done and, the other work of building up the human relationships and the interpersonal work and emotional work and stuff like that. It's like there are a variety of opinions. Like, does that actually help us remain a strong community? Like, does that bring people here to stay and give them a reason to stay and then allow them to work without burning out on the mission? I would like to think so. But I do think there are people here, like in their experience hasn't borne that out, and so they're less interested in spending time and energy on that type of work.
What advice would you give someone who doesn't really have any community experience,
Mm-hmm.
but is specifically interested in the type of mission that LAF holds and would want to perhaps come visit or come live at LAF?
Yeah. As like trite as it sounds to say this, like I would say like do your homework. Look at a place like this where like Debbie and Alexis have been working for over a decade, and don't turn off your brain. Don't be dogmatic. Don't imagine that they've answered every question in the best possible way. I mean, for example, the supply and cost of photovoltaic solar panels a decade ago was vastly different than it is today. So certain conditions change, and there are things that merit thought and reconsideration. But like, I don't know, yeah, like read the books, read the old newsletters, come visit. Operate under the assumption that the people who have been here living this way, like doing the work, have actually put a lot of thought into it, and that there are reasons for doing what they're doing, because I think that's what's special about this place is that it is very mission oriented, and also like we're eating our own dog food. Like there's the people here are not saying in a prescriptive way like you should live this way, and I'm going to continue to live in my mainstream way. It's like no, we're doing it, and we're living with the consequences of that. Good and bad, mostly good, I would say. So when people are there, like living with it, like it's kind of there's a lot of it's hard to say. The mainstream is so entrenched, right? Like people have put so much energy into like building their careers or like saving money so they could buy a house that was built in a certain way or all that stuff. Having a car that they use to get around. It's like cars like feel like such an integral part often of like identity and independence. So there's there's a whole mindset of people wanting to preserve all those individualistic and sort of like high consumption things. That's a really easy message in some ways to sell, because it's telling you that you don't really have to consider things that may be somewhat foundational to your life, and that they just may not be workable. They may not be sustainable in any way.
Have you tried to convince your partner to move out here?
Yeah. No. And the reason why is mostly because of her social circle in Baltimore. I just don't know what... I think it would be really unfair to ask someone to give up like all those connections to the music scene and things that she's put a lot of years into and passionate about to come down here.
What has been the biggest inconvenience that you've encountered?
It's stupid. I would say like dishwashing, cleaning the kitchen. Was something that I had to just get used to doing, and I did a lot of it because other people were cooking for me because I couldn't do that in the middle of the workday. But coming and spending like 2 hours cleaning a kitchen or something is just a lot, and I would just think to myself like, damn, what other things could I be doing, like even mission related things with the time that I could save, like if we had a dishwasher or something. And I haven't totally gotten the idea out of my head that we could have like a daylight drive dishwasher or something like that, at least so on certain days you could have that taken care of. But yeah, that's a thing. It's different. And before coming here, I can't say I'd spent like hours an evening cleaning a kitchen.
Is there anything that I didn't bring up that you want to mention or that was on your mind?
Not really. No, this is cool to sit down, and thanks for organizing this and giving me all the prompts. Yeah, it's just not something we usually do, sit down and reflect that way.
Cool. Thanks,
Yeah.
John.
Yeah, thank you.